Hello and welcome to Restore 2022. We are in Corinthians chapter 11, and Paul has just finished his argument about freedom in Christ and about the seriousness of participating in the demonic dinner parties. And he's moving on now to chapter 11 to address the behaviors which impact the gathering for worship the Christians in Corinth. Paul's input here comes from his understanding, his Jewish understanding, and his background and interpretations of Genesis 2:18 to 25. In the first century Greece, the dress for men and women were similar, except for the women's head covering. It's also been suggested that the sacred prostitutes from the local temple of Aphrodite did not wear head coverings. But we know Corinth was emancipated, was developed. Now, there were no such things as Sunday's best dressing for the gathering of the church, for fellowship and worship. People came with their normal clothes. The men came without any head coverings. Women came with them as they would do in a normal everyday life. But according to Paul, some didn't. And in the Jewish temple worship, the women were kept on their own, out of sight, behind the screen, and the men always prayed with their heads covered. But Paul didn't want for this issue to be a source of division or the hindrance of the gospel here. So, although he's bringing his Jewish understanding in this community of believers, both men and women here are one significant step further than the Jewish community were before. He tells the men to pray with their heads uncovered, verse 4. But also he expects that the women take an active part for both in prayer and in prophecy, which was not the case previously. So just as the Spirit of Christ continued to work with the apostles, he worked with Peter when he just enriched his limited perception of the universal nature of the church and the gospel. And the same Spirit is at work with Paul now. And he's got more of a understanding of the relationship of men and women within the Christian community and within the Christian marriage. And the ideal for the male-female relationship within a Christian community is not spelled out in Corinthians, but is spelled out in the church in Galatia. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ, because there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And then Paul moves on with another disorder in service. It's to do with the Lord's Supper, with the Lord's table. What does it mean to take part in it unworthily? Does it mean that whoever has not lived a perfect life the previous week will not participate? Definitely not. The challenge here is for order, for the right attitude, for the right way of conducting your way in worship. Because the Lord's table, together with that feast of agape, the feast of love, is that reminder that there is forgiveness for the sinner and strength for the weak and the weary. So the warning here is not to come to it when you're insensitive of his presence, unloving of your fellow brothers and sisters, regretful for his great sacrifice on the community's behalf. So this awareness of God's love for us ought to make it easier for us to love one another and therefore order and behavior and the right conduct is quite natural.